For many years, Esquire magazine had an annual feature they called the Dubious Achievement Awards. For most of that time, they ran this picture of Richard Nixon with the caption, "Why is this man laughing?" And that's why I put up a photo of Donald Trump and asked the question, why is this man laughing? Yeah, it's really more of a forced smile, reminiscent of the Shakespearean character Malvolio from Twelfth Night, who thinks he has to smile in order to get the girl, and it hurts his face. But the real question is, why is this man popular? Yeah, I know, he lost the popular vote both times, and he lost the election in 2020, but he still got 60 million votes the first time and almost 75 million the second time, so he's pretty popular. But why? Self-appointed pundits, many of them very well paid, seem to have a hard time answering this question, yet it turns out that the answer isn't all that difficult to understand, and it goes to the very heart of why I created this YouTube channel. We're going to look at why Trump is so popular, why other future Trumps could also achieve that popularity, and what we can and must do to stop it on this episode of Progressive Solutions. This episode will be a little bit different. It's more of an op-ed as opposed to a researched presentation, although it's based on research I've been doing. I'll also include links to other videos that I reference as I go through this one. And I'm sure you have your opinions, and I'd like to know them, so leave them in the comments below. And if you like this video, hit that thumbs up button. Also be sure to subscribe and ring the bell so you'll be notified of future videos when they come out. Back in 2015, I first noticed that Trump wasn't saying anything new. Oh, he blamed Mexican immigrants for just about everything, but that sort of garbage has been going on for almost 2 centuries. He also attacked Vietnam War heroes and disabled people, but they also have come under attack before. What Trump did that was new was that he said out loud and in plain language what Republicans have been whispering and dog-whistling about for decades. And that tactic sparked his rise to the top of the Republican Party. And the stunning thing was, he wasn't just gaining support from hard right-wing of Republicans. He was getting a lot of support from independents. What was even more perplexing, at least to most self-appointed pundits, is that a lot of people who supported Trump also supported Bernie Sanders. So it wasn't his race baiting that got him a lot of support, except among the basket of deplorables that do make up some of his base, but that part of his base wasn't enough. He needed independent support, and that meant there was another reason for his popularity. In order to understand why he won so many independents as well as right-wing Republicans, we have to know something about independents that the Democratic Party has been getting wrong for the last 40 years. I'm going to give a quick overview, but you can get a more detailed history of how and where the Democrats went wrong in one of my earliest videos. It's linked up here and in the description below. Since the early 80s, Democratic Party leaders have constantly insisted that the party needs to move to the center in order to win independent votes, because they assume that independents are centrists. But independents aren't centrists. They're independent. They don't care whether an idea comes from the left, the right, or outer space. They'll vote for ideas, and they'll vote for the ideas that seem to connect to their needs, regardless of who spouts them. And that's why so many people support both Trump and Sanders, because both of them put out ideas that seem to connect to people's needs. Those ideas are about as different can be, but independent voters don't care about that. In addition, a lot of Democrats are always wondering why so many people seem to vote against their self-interest. That view is wrong. People aren't voting against their self-interest. They're voting for their self-interest. And if we're going to stop future Trumps, we need to understand that self-interest right down to our core. As Democrats scrambled to move ever closer to this mythical center, they abandoned any ideas that might actually help most people, especially those who used to belong to the middle class and are now struggling. Democrats abandoned unions in the early 80s. They abandoned homeowners during the Great Recession. They bailed out banks while letting those banks get away with foreclosing on millions of homeowners, even as many of those foreclosures were illegal. Democrats supported the center-right Obamacare, which was based on a Heritage Foundation proposal, and then didn't even run on it, which let Republicans shred much of it over the last decade. Meanwhile, the Democratic Party focuses on proposals that'll help mostly the well-to-do while ignoring most Americans. Their fight over how much college student loan debt to forgive when 2/3 of Americans don't even go to college is a perfect example. And yes, I have a video on that as well, and yes, it's linked up here and in the description below. Recently, incoming Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer said that one of his top priorities is to eliminate the limit on tax deductions for state and local taxes paid. Well, 90% of Americans don't itemize their deductions, so this doesn't apply to them. 90%! Schumer's top priority is only going to help the wealthy. I could go on for days listing the priorities of Democratic Party leaders that have nothing to do with what most Americans go through in their daily lives. Is it wonder that so many Americans are gravitating toward the Republican Party? At this point, I'm going to recommend a book I just finished. It's now here on my shelf. It's called Listen, Liberal, or Whatever Happened to the Party of the People by Thomas Frank, who also wrote What's the Matter with Kansas. In this book, he does go on, and he gives a lot of specific examples of how Democratic Party leaders, and especially the last two Democratic presidents, have thrown hardworking Americans under the bus in favor of the elite professional class. This leaves hardworking Americans, most of whom consider themselves to be middle class, or at least trying to get back into the middle class, grasping for anything that'll make them feel better. President Clinton's first labor secretary, Robert Reich, actually predicted the rise of Trump, or Trumpism, in a speech at Cal Berkeley in 2011. When so many people are so angry and so frustrated and so powerless, when so many people feel that the dice are loaded against them, they are easily vulnerable to demagogues who use the politics of resentment to blame others. That politics of resentment can easily, we know because there are enough historical examples, get out of hand. Now, Republicans don't offer them any economic help either. The Republican tax cuts only help people who are even too wealthy for Democrats, and Republican deregulation doesn't help anyone who doesn't own their own business. But Republicans in general offer struggling Americans the opportunity to blame someone else for their problems, usually government, and especially Democrats who support big government. And they also offer struggling Americans the ability to feel good about themselves even as they struggle. The problem for Republicans is not only that they never make things any better, but also that they've been touting the same failed ideas for over 40 years, and there's reason to believe that people are starting to tire of it. Or at least they were. And then along came Trump. As I said earlier, Trump offered nothing new. All he did was repackage the same tired old Republican ideas in an all-out, massive, no-apologies attack on what Democratic Party leaders and the pundit class call norms. And once again, the Democratic Party just doesn't get it. After decades of norms that resulted in most people working harder and getting less, people don't want norms. They want to get rid of norms, and they want an iconoclast who will break up those norms. And Donald Trump has been that iconoclast. It's what he promised to be during his campaign, and it's exactly what he's been as president. You could say he's the first president in a long time to keep his basic campaign promise, to bust up norms. And tens of millions of Americans love him for it. They love him even more every time he violates one of those norms, because that's exactly what they want. And honestly, considering that following the norms has been a real disaster for most Americans, can you blame them for wanting dramatic and drastic change? I wish I could remember who first said that Trump's opponents take him literally but not seriously, while his supporters take him seriously but not literally. They don't care about the specifics of what he says. They only care that he's the iconoclast they've been waiting for. Back in 2012, a friend arranged a meeting between me and a Tea Party organizer. During the meeting, in which the organizer did most of the talking, really, he showed me the 12-step plan that they had for remaking the federal government. At the time, he said, we were in step 5. Step 6 was the actual collapse of the federal government, and steps 7 through 12 were how they were going to remake it based on their idea of what the founders originally wanted. He also confidently claimed that if Barack Obama was re-elected, that the federal government would fall apart, step 6, within 6 months of re-inauguration. For years, I regretted not keeping in touch with him so I could find out what happened to his grand plan when the federal government didn't fall apart, but now I think I know. Trump is doing, or had been doing when he had the power, exactly that, busting up the federal government. Every working day, when he wasn't on the golf course, he spent trying to destroy everything about the federal government. Heck, even his time on the golf course helped that plan because nobody was minding the store. His political appointees are incompetent by design. They can't help but mess things up. And his constant shifting from day to day, often changing his mind in less than a day, pushes out bureaucrats with a lot of experience and institutional knowledge to keep things going. Thomas Jefferson's words in the Declaration of Independence have some sage advice for what's going on these days. Prudence indeed will dictate that governments long established should not be changed for light and transient causes, and accordingly all experience hath shown that mankind are more disposed to suffer while evils are sufferable than to right themselves by abolishing the forms to which they are accustomed. But when a long train of abuses and usurpations, pursuing invariably the same object, evinces a design to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is their right, it is their duty to throw off such government and to provide new guards for their future security. In Ronald Reagan's first inaugural address, he said, "In this present crisis, government is not the solution to the problem, government is the problem." For 40 years, Americans have increasingly believed that. They believe that the government is abusing them. And they're not wrong. As the middle class is continually hollowed out and hope for the future is disappearing, more and more Americans want to throw off such government. Trump is destroying even the form of our current government, which is exactly what those Americans want. That's why so many of them are willing, even eager, to invade the Capitol, and it's why almost every Republican House member voted against the impeachment resolution, because they want a piece of that admiration that Americans have for Trump. The only wonder is that he isn't more popular. If he had had even a shred of human decency, he might have been. And those who want to right the ship should be grateful that Trump was so hideous, because the next Trump might not be. When Ronald Reagan was elected, I was 18, and I thought we had hit rock bottom. 20 years later, when George W. Bush was elected, I was certain we'd hit rock bottom. When Trump was elected, my biggest fear was that we hadn't yet hit rock bottom. Imagine a Trump version 2 who is just as hell-bent on destroying American norms, but doesn't bring that massive ego along with him. That would most likely be rock bottom, and we wouldn't survive it. We have to take measures now to stop the next Trump from happening. No more incrementalism, no more competence as the gold standard, no more business as usual, and no more putting the professional elite class ahead of the masses. We need tax, trade, labor, housing, transportation, justice, environmental, and healthcare policies, and a lot more that benefit middle America, and we need them now. And that, I finally realized, is why I started this YouTube channel. It's why I'm constantly researching ideas and histories, and it's why I hope to continue putting out proposals that will truly make America great again. And it's why I'm always asking for your ideas. Let me know what you like, what you don't like, and what your solutions are. If we find, support, and enact actual solutions that can help the vast majority of Americans for the problems they face daily, we can bring those tens of millions of Americans back and keep future Trumps from happening. We truly are at a crossroads in America. We can continue the decline and sink into a future that would make Pollyanna or Pangloss sob uncontrollably. Or we can chart a dramatically different course, truly help those who need it, and return to the optimistic America that led the world in so many ways. They called the 20th century the American century. If we do this right, then we'll be able to say, in the words of Al Jolson, "You ain't seen nothing yet." Thanks for watching. Stay progressive.